Hello, everyone, and welcome to Black Kids in Outer Space. Yes. Today we have. Let me get your bio ready. I'm so excited to have you here. Kali Akuno is the editor, along with Ajax Nanjagwa, of the book Jackson Rising: The Struggle of Economic Democracy and the Black Self-Determination in Jackson, Mississippi. He is also co-founder and co-director of Cooperation Jackson. Highly served as the director of special projects and external funding in the mayoral administration of the late Chokwe Lumumba of Jackson, Mississippi. His focus in this role was supporting cooperative development with the introduction of eco-friendly methods of operation and the promotion of human rights and international relations for the city. Holly also served as the co-director of the U.S. Human Rights, executive director of the People's Hurricane Relief Fund, based in New Orleans, Louisiana, after Hurricane Katrina, and was the co-founder of the School of Social Justice and Community Development, public school serving the academic needs of low-income African American and Latino communities in Oakland and California. So I usually start off with a very kind of a basic, but kind of it can go anywhere with. What is your first memory of space?
My first memory of space, it would have to be of a drive-in theater
Mm-hmm.
watching Star Wars when it was released with my parents in 1976. That's probably the first time like I really remember space is where I wanted to be, and what made kind of logical sense for my generation. And I'm still kind of like wondering what happened, where we at. We're supposed to be flying cars. Where's Blade Runner at? We had 2018. Something happened. Something didn't quite go right. But that's my first concrete memory of space. In my family, my father in particular was a big Sun Ra fan.
Mm-hmm.
So grew up watching Spaces, the place, quite regularly. Considered myself a citizen of Saturn. I remember Stevie Wonder's Saturn song, for those of you who don't remember, on the Journey to the Secret Life of Plants, which came out 78. If I remember correctly, 1978, around that time. One of his most slept on albums. But just that period, Battlestar Galactica, the reruns of Star Trek, all of the Outer Limits that had features. So I grew up with a full diet of all of that, and took as much as I could in. Trust me.
Yes, yes. So, kind of going on to, I want to talk about your book a little bit, or the book that you edited, Jackson Rising. Is it an archive documentation or a living and breathing guide?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. We intended it to be a living and breathing guide, particularly kind of where we at with our development, with like the build and fight chapter, the chapter around the People's Assembly, some of the reflections of people like Saki, sharing her experience, kind of like the here and now as it was in 2017, I think, when that particular issue was done. But also to be a reflection on kind of where, that being when it came out in October 2017, so a little bit more than a year ago. We also wanted to just be a fair assessment for those who are interested in the work and trying to take some aspects of it up in their local work of, what kind of summations of our experience that you could draw upon to either build upon or to try to, walk around some of the challenges that we have confronted and faced. So to be both that reflection but also like, here are some things that you can practically kind of take from our work and try to incorporate in your own.
Hmm. No, I think that that's really important for not just archiving, but also a guide, because that's really a problem in regards to like Black liberation, self-determination, and just people in general not being victims to capitalism. Um, so let's see here. So what is um, what's the difference between a co-op and a commune?
Um, Good question. The commune, I think I'm gonna just give you kind of our definitions of it, right? So
Okay.
the commune we would describe as the physical living embodiment of our community. That would be the commune.
Hmm.
And it would be composed of a number of institutions, co-ops being one of them, but not the sum total of the things that would be there, right? And
Hmm.
so it would be the commune would be first and foremost the people and their social relationships with each other. But then two, what are the different types of institutions that we've created to give life to, ourselves, to reproduce ourselves, but to also create a more equitable, just society, where we can practice various degrees of autonomy and self-determination. And I say that varying degrees because, until the back of capitalism is imperialism is broke,
Hmm.
we can create spaces where we could be more of ourselves, be more human, but there's
Hmm.
always going to be those impositions that come in from the outside that you're going to constantly have to confront, right?
Hmm.
So the commune is a way for us to both kind of shelter and protect ourselves, but to also give us space, more liberated space, be it temporary, like a temporary autonomous zone, or something more permanent because of the institutions that we built that gives ourselves and those who believe in what we believe some leverage to begin to practice and build out and transform the system. The co-ops are just a democratic form by which we exchange goods and services. That would be the basic way that I would really try to break down what a co-op is. It's democratically owned, democratically managed, but it's just really a way for how do we meet each other's needs? How do we feed each other? How do we house each other? How do we clothe each other? And what institutions do we create in the forms of things that produce these goods and services that we need and exchange them in a democratic manner. That's what the co-op is. But the broader commune, at least for us, the core of it really would be the communal land holding that we have, right? In our form, it's the community land trust. That's the real solid basis, because
Hmm.
without that land, it's really hard to have a commune in any formal sense of the word, particularly one that you're trying to intend to last for a minute. And for us, we wanted to kind of create this establishment of buying, some of the facilities. The house I'm in right now is part of our growing and developing housing co-op, right? But if we didn't have control over these means, where we dictate how much goes into, kind of a monthly investment to make sure that there's repairs, that the infrastructure can be maintained, so it's a little bit different than your normal rent where you're paying somebody else and they take the profit away and do what they want with it. Like
Hmm.
this is maintaining us, right? And the resources that we put back into it help sustain it, grow it, and advance it. And that would be the critical piece, another component for us of the commune that would be in addition to the co-ops, the that we function, grow, and to try to nurture here in Jackson.
I love the fact that you guys are in Jackson, Mississippi, but you're originally from Los Angeles. So why are
That's
you
right.
doing it in Jackson, but not Los Angeles?
Well, I was born, for folks, in your audience. I was born in Watts,
Hmm.
born on Corrosis Avenue. For those of you who care to know, um, and grew up mainly right across the Alameda tracks over in Linwood. Graduated from Linwood High.
Hmm.
And when I was there, my family moved into Linwood in 1976. and we were the second black family to live on the block that I live on. But by
Mhm.
1980, that entire street, basically, with the exception of one white woman who held out, that entire block became black in a short span of 4 years. Now you
Mhm.
fast forward basically another 20 years, and the composition of the neighborhood changed profoundly. It would be
Mhm.
from being predominantly black to predominantly Central American.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, the one of the things that moved me out and made me kind of walk away from LA was just wanting to be around black people. No
Mhm.
disrespect or no disregard to our Central American brothers and sisters, Chicano brothers and sisters, but just wanted to be affirmed by my culture and the history that's associated with it, and then the historic task to me to how I grew up that went with it, right? And so my family, like most of the black families that moved out to LA, particularly after World War II, we had deep roots in the South. In my family, particularly on my maternal side of my family, its roots are in Louisiana and Mississippi.
Like everybody in
And,
LA.
right, right, and I grew up with uh, family that had a little bit of land in both, and me and my uncle, my oldest brother, have been taking an interest in trying to preserve the family land since going back to the 1980s. So I started working with my family to preserve it, as well as like don't sell it to me, or turn it over to me. And so that's a program I've had for a long, long time, long before coming and moving to Jackson. It's just part of my family's consciousness, political consciousness as well, just familiar consciousness. Um, so it was politics really
Mhm.
that drove me here, and really looking at in the context of this empire that we live in called the United States, where could I make the greatest contribution toward the liberation of my people?
Mhm.
And to me, after many staying in California, off and on basically until 2006, really. Um, it just all the roads pointed to this would be where we would have the best shot, just given some of the population dynamics and shifts that are occurring in the country, how many people have been moving back down south, particularly my generation and younger. So I just see myself as part of that kind of grand trend and narrative, and have been trying to encourage folks to make a move, back to Louisiana, back to Mississippi or Alabama or South Carolina or Georgia, as part of my politics for well over the past 30 years. So I was advocating people move back here even long before I got back here.
Mhm.
Um, so that's what really drove me here. And Jackson in particular, um, what got me here was a commitment to come and work with some of the forces in the Malcolm X grassroots movement and the New African Peoples Organization that I was once part of, and to really help try to build the work in the project here after my experiences in New Orleans, where I saw very systematically how that city was basically, just stripped, intentionally stripped of its black majority by the federal government with the excuse of the flooding after Hurricane Katrina, bringing the prelude to move our people out of there. So I was there really from the end of 2005 to the beginning of 2008, and systematically fought against that, but could tell you horror stories of how they systematically just move methodically, moving our people out and basically blocking all the avenues by which people could get back, from destroying public housing to rezoning the place, stripping the unions, teachers union in particular, the bus drivers union, like the things that they did, which were conscious, deliberate, and intent to make sure that there would be no overwhelming black majority in New Orleans ever again if they can help it. So, knowing that, seeing that, that's what drove me in part to Jackson to say, hey, we gotta take a stand, and no better place than here, just given the dynamics that existed then and now in Jackson.
And how many Black people are in Jackson? Like, what's the percentage? I mean, I know we're just
Well,
an audience.
uh well, I mean, so folks know who who are watching, listening, who may not know, Jackson is roughly 200,000 people, and it is over 80% Black. So you're talking about roughly 180,000 people. You know,
Mhm.
um, look like me and you. The city is deeply impoverished. Um, when I'm using that word intentfully to mean not poor, but impoverished, means that people are being exploited and being placed in this position very intentionally and systematically. There's a tremendous amount of natural wealth and financial wealth that actually exists in and around the city, but we don't control it. So most of our people in particular in Jackson, uh, officially 20% live below the government, poverty line. But the real pain and suffering of being deprived of high quality meals, access to good food, access to decent health care, quality education, that speaks to more than 50% of our people here in this city easily. So that just gives you a sense of what you're looking at and what the dynamics are here in Jackson.
And for Cooperation Jackson, within your co-op, do you have schools? Do you have gardens? Like, what kind of businesses do you have? It's kind of a different question, but just me having roots in the South and just kind of curious what they're doing with the people who are there and like what are they experiencing? Because it been seems to be supported and successful from the wider community.
I mean, let me start. So go back to the kind of foundation for us is really our community land trust,
Hmm.
and we have over 40 parcels of land in the community land trust. We have three houses right now, that are inhabited. We're bringing two online. One would be kind of more of a visitor's house and a guest house, a solidarity house. The other one, we're going to put in some new members. We are aiming to rehab by the end of 2020 about four more of those. And these are houses that are on some of these abandoned property, these abandoned lots that have houses that can be fixed up. We have some where there was just no possibility of those old structures being rehabbed, so we've torn down and tried to repurpose. I think, if my memory corrects me, about four of those homes
Hmm.
over the past couple of years, past 2 years in particular. So the community land trust, that's where our main center is a part of the land trust. Our main farming plots, we do have an urban farming co-op called Freedom Farms in honor of the co-op of the similar name that Fannie Lou Hamer had in the late 1960s. Um, and then most of our other kind of facilities, in addition to those houses that are up and running, which includes our newest one, which is the Community Production Center, and that's our uh, uh, small scale digital fabrication factory. Basically, that's 3D printing, meal cutting, etc. For those who aren't familiar with that term, and that is an emerging co-op, the Community Production Co-op, which is going to be focused in this initial run at doing printing, producing furniture, and eventually producing housing, at cost housing. We're trying to get the price point down at between $10,000 and $15,000 to make it affordable for our people. And the other fully functioning co-op that we have now is called the Green Team, which at this stage is primarily just doing lawn care work. And then some other things that we have that are kind of like in the back burner, if you would. We had a cafe operation, cafe and catering operation, that has been scaled back until such time as we get a new building, which we're in a major fund drive to get to now. Um, because there'll be a actually fully functioning kitchen that they can work in. Now, our Kawasi Lagoon Center has a fully functioning kitchen in it, but unfortunately, it doesn't have the necessary parking space that we need per city rules and regulations. We own a lot that's right next to it, but we want to
Hmm.
use it for farming as opposed to paving it over, in line with our principles around being ecologically sound and just as possible. So we're going to shift that over, start that all over again. Probably won't be till 2020 that we get that fully functioning again, because the new folks going to need training, etc., in just the basic principles and developing a business plan there. And then there's some transportation co-op work that's kind of in the grind, and we're going to give another good go around at doing arts and culture co-op very soon to fill in a gap that we have in our community. So that's what we had. We got a couple other different things that are different stages of development, but those are the most mature pieces that we have right now.
That sounds amazing. I kind of want to bring up Phil Bryant, your governor, who you characterize as a neo-Confederate, and he sounds terrifying. So, how is it living in this place that, as a little girl, I heard such horrible stories about Mississippi, kind of like in this black paradise? Not nothing is paradise. I mean, there's there are issues, but it kind of seems like this really kind of cool thing. But you have all of these things kind of. You have to run it. How does that work? Did he come after you guys? Did he try to make bad things happen to you? Is he thinking about you?
We on his mind. It's as small as we are, in terms of the grand scale of what's needed. We are on his mind. In the area where we come on his radar screen, and the other neo Confederates that are allied with him, who control our state government. And folks should know, um, the Republican Party only runs this state in name. The folks that we have in power are hardcore right wing libertarian folks who come out of the Tea Party. That's the neo Confederates. To just be precise about that, so your audience know who we talking about, what we dealing with. And these are folks. These are folks that Trump has really modeled himself after, and folks in Mississippi basically been living with Trump like politics basically since Reconstruction. So for folks who are kind of scrambling under Trump, know that there are ways that people have learned of how to maneuver, how to function, how to thrive, with his particular brand of neo-Confederate, neo-fascist politics. Now that don't mean it's easy. Don't get it wrong or twisted in any form or fashion. Where what I go say, and I didn't finish that point, but where he comes after us is particularly is around the intersection of what we push that has to deal with climate change. That's what they seem to pay the most attention to us on, is being, climate justice advocates and pushing for a just transition. And that is, now Mississippi is not an oil kind of rentier state to the extent that Louisiana is, which is right next door, or the eastern part of Texas with Houston and that whole oil producing corridor down there. We do have some fracking in the state, but more importantly, for the folks here, is the old ruling plantation families have made several shifts over the last 400, 60 something years of moving their money around. So even though there's no major oil field production here as there is in those two states that I mentioned, the ruling class here is heavily invested in production facilities in Texas and in Louisiana. And us advocating for a broader program of transformation puts their money at risk, put their money, under threat. And so we've done things that we didn't initially think would have any consequence. Myself and a couple of our folks about 3 years ago, and so your audience know we're a relatively young organization. Cooperation Jackson is barely like 4.5 years old. Now the thinking behind it is much longer, and the preparation is much longer, but the actual organization is only 4 years old. So we went about 3 years ago to, I think it was COP 20 in was that Lima, Peru? That we went to Lima, Peru,
Mhm.
and we came back. We did a little report back, and on the back of that little report back, which probably had no more than 20 people in it, in our center, one of these fools put forth a whole proposal that got adopted, from this neo-Confederate operation, that the state of Mississippi would not comply with any UN mandate around climate change and totally rejected climate science. That was straight up on the backs of us doing a report back during, so to give you a sense of time, we went in the December, I think, of 2014. We did this report back in January 2015. And in January 2015 is when, January basically through April, is when the state legislature sits in office here. So one of them heard about this, saw it on our social media, or saw it in some of the local print media, and then immediately went after it. That is the extent. I'm just citing this as telling y'all this story to give you a sense of how much we are monitored, observed, and watched here, in terms of either ideas to appropriate or ideas that need to be attacked and shut down. So the active contest both of ideas and policy and real motion on the ground level, on the material level, that is real, here as real can get. And we have the kind of ability to work at a profounder scale as a result, in part because of the population dynamics. And to give folks, I told you, Jackson is 200,000 people. That's the capital. Jackson is the capital of the state of Mississippi. Mississippi
Mhm.
only has about 2 to 2 million, somewhere between 2 million and 2.5 million people. And I often joke, that the People's Republic of Brooklyn has more people than the entire state of Mississippi. And so I want folks to put that in motion. And so that kind of scale means that our operation, uh, you know, touching 10, a couple of hundred people, has a real political impact here, far beyond what the actual number of, just given the nature of the concentration. But again, this is one of the reasons why somebody like me wanted to move here, just to make that
Mhm.
clear, because it's the scale which allows us to do things that kind of have a larger, more immediate impact. And going back to the question of why leaving, L.A. Number one, the community that I grew up in and was nurtured by had basically been eviscerated by capital, and that I should have stated that more clearly, not by immigration. Let's get that clear, but by capital and its logic of moving people out, moving new people in to serve. We was cheap labor at one point in time, and they moved in a cheaper source of labor to fill a particular need. We trying to cut that circuit off. So here you can operate on a particular scale that has an impact far beyond your kind of immediate numbers. And that's something anybody who's listening to this, I want you to seriously consider, as a means of moving back to the South for strategic purposes. Because we if we tried to do the same thing in the little bitty old town of Linwood, California, where I was mentioned to, I was raised, it would be a nice little novel project, but it wouldn't have the same political impact by far. That you'd have to have
Mhm.
far more money to buy any property and land there, and you'd have to instead of moving a couple of hundred people, you'd have to move people in their tens of thousands to have the same level of impact. Now, I think ultimately all of us need to be aspiring to reach our people in the millions, not just the thousands, in the millions. but we got to work our way up, and we just trying to make our small contribution to building that base, building that commune, as you mentioned, and then growing from there with the concrete example of what a liberated zone could look like, could function like, that other people could adopt over time.
So how can we help the movement? 'Cause I don't view this like your like cooperation, Jackson. I view it as like you're a living example for Black liberation. So like, how can people support what you're doing?
The most concrete thing that folks can do in the short term to help us immediately is to become a sustainer of our organization. We want to get to a point where uh, we can function purely off of the people understanding the mission and committing our precious resources to it. So all of you who are listening, viewing, if you could become a sustainer and give $5 a month, $500 a month, whatever you could give, it goes a long way towards us advancing our program. And people making, be it monthly, quarterly, or yearly contributions, goes a long way. Two, we are in an active fundraising campaign right now to buy, as I mentioned earlier, a new plaza to add to our community land trust, but more importantly, for two reasons: to fight gentrification. There's a whole piece that you can go to our website and look at called "Help Us Hold the Fortification Line." Fortification in this case refers to a street called Fortification Street, kind of coincidentally or ironically. Um, and we are trying to purchase this, what we're calling the Ida B. Wells Plaza, so that we basically have a lockdown on Capitol Street and can be a blocking force towards the gentrification, which is coming towards West Jackson from the north. So we want to be in a strong strategic positioning to fight back against this. And we got an opportunity to do it. And I think most Black communities right now, unfortunately, couldn't even fathom or dream of. But it's only going to be possible if we can raise the money to secure this plaza kind of outright. And part of the appeal, we trying to explain to a lot of our folks. Some people, why don't y'all just take a loan, etc. We kind of have this attitude. We don't take no loans. If we can't, we try to buy it outright and deal with it, because we done went through too many, in our experience here in Jackson and probably other places as well, went through too many little games with banks and X, Y, and Z that don't work in our favor. So we've been trying to bypass that as much as possible. The total asking price on this plaza is $400,000. We've already raised and have in pocket $200,000, and just trying to make the match the other 200 to just buy this thing outright, so we can start working on building up a grocery store cooperative in that spot over the course of the next couple of years. And the other thing speaks to, it's a plaza, so there's other spaces in it that we would be in control of through the CLT. There's a few businesses there that we would definitely want to stay, but there'll be some new space available, and we want to make this deeply affordable to the young entrepreneurs and artists in our community, so they can have a place, to be themselves, to be creative, to produce the goods and services our people need, and to do it in a way that they have enough time, energy, and space to grow, and not constantly have to worry about rent over their head. Force them to make oftentimes tough decisions around, can you keep it going, or do you have enough time, energy to kind of figure out how to run the business and to grow, which a lot of times we don't, because we start small business, we don't own the building and facility, and then you constantly have to try to pay rent while you're trying to figure out how to run the business. We're trying to eliminate that negative circle and create a much more nurturing environment with our community land trust in this piece, to be able to extend this vision, this commune, for us. So those are the two kind of immediate ways that folks can help us contributing to this fundraising drive, and then becoming a sustainer. The third way, which is the most important way in the most strategic sense, wherever you at, we need a cooperation, whatever, cooperation Los Angeles, cooperation Brooklyn, because this particular vision this particular model and way of creating liberated zones has to extend. We cannot survive for too long living in some isolated, black radical bubble. You've heard a little bit about, as you laid out, you know, if it ain't Phil Bryant, it's going to be somebody like Phil Bryant who's going to be the next governor of the state. That's guaranteed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they aiming for. So if we don't have other folks of a similar mind, a similar program that we can kind of draw upon, use as a rear base, use as support, create our own value and supply chains, we helping each other to sustain ourselves. If that's not built, over time, uh, we're gonna be boxed in, and we and us in the broad sense of anybody who believes in this broader mission, we cannot afford that. So that's why people building similar institutions in your own community, that's ultimately the best way to help us in the long run.
So people can just go to the website, they can purchase a book, and I'll put all that
Yeah,
information underneath the interview after I finish editing. But
yeah.
that's is there anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Um, thank you for doing this. I love the title. I love the aspiration. Um, I'm part of the Black Nerd tribe, so we one of the main things I plan on doing, at some part of my life is actually working, with this digital fabrication piece that we got, working on, if not a spaceship, we're gonna get that car we was promised in Blade Runner off the ground. So be on the lookout for that, and keep inspiring folks with what you're doing, and putting out this Afrofuturist vision, because we need it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kali, for speaking with Black Kids in Outer Space, and have a great time in building. I know you guys are going to make it, because that's not that much. So it's, and it's an inspirational thing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.